welcome to the deep dive. So picture this diplomatic game, right? But then one player just flips the whole board over.
Yeah.
That's kind of what we're seeing between the U.S. and Canada this week. Canada just slammed back with, wow, 50% tariffs on American exports. It looks like a full-blown trade showdown, and it's happening right now.
Yeah, it's revealing not just the action itself, but how fast this whole thing escalated. I mean, this level of friction, we really haven't seen this between the U.S. and Canada in, well, decades. It sort of suggests both sides were maybe already willing to use trade this way, not just reacting in the moment. And the economic impact, well, we're already seeing those ripples spreading out.
Right. That speed you mentioned really underlines how high the stakes are here. So let's rewind a bit. What exactly was the spark? What triggered Canada's pretty bold countermove?
Well, the immediate trigger, it seems, came just hours after former President Trump went public on Truth Social. He really blasted Canada, called their actions manipulative trade tactics, and accused them of, quote, disrespect toward American sovereignty. So while his words were the direct catalyst, it feels like it tapped into frustrations that were already there, just, waiting to boil over.
And Canada's response was, wow, fast and clear. Prime Minister Trudeau, he didn't pull any punches, did he?
No, not at all. He held a press conference and basically said, and this is a direct quote, "We will not allow our economy to be bullied." He added, "These tariffs are necessary and targeted, and the message is clear. Canada will defend its interests at all costs." And these 50% tariffs, they're not just symbolic. They're high enough to be, well, pretty much prohibitive. They cover a really wide range of U.S. goods. You're talking steel, key farm goods, electronics, even down to things like automobile parts.
Okay, so a very direct, very forceful message coming from Ottawa. Given that kind of response, what was the reaction from former President Trump, and what are we hearing from inside the White House?
Trump's reaction was, as you might expect, immediate and fiery. Right back on Truth Social. He called Canada's move a disaster, a betrayal by our neighbor to the north. He actually wrote, "We gave Canada everything and they just stabbed us in the back." And then a clear warning, this will not go unanswered.
Yeah, and reports we're getting suggest there's, well, significant chaos within the White House now. Trump loyalists are apparently pushing really hard for a complete review of the entire U.S.-Canada trade relationship. That includes talk about possibly halting Canadian imports altogether, maybe even suspending existing deals. Things like, parts of the USMCA agreement could be on the table.
Okay, so beyond the political back and forth, what about the actual economic fallout? How is this dispute actually hitting communities, hitting industries, especially on the U.S. side? The impact is already being felt quite significantly, especially in border states and for U.S. manufacturers. Think about the Midwest, places that really depend heavily on that integrated cross-border trade, those supply chains. Right now, consumers might start seeing higher prices for some goods. Manufacturers, they're facing higher costs for materials, logistical headaches. What's also interesting, maybe a bit concerning, is that Canadian officials are saying they coordinated this move with other allies.
Coordinated? So this might not just be a U.S.-Canada thing.
Exactly. It raises that question, right? Is this bigger than just a bilateral spat? It could potentially signal the start of a broader global reaction against U.S. protectionism. That focus on protecting domestic industries with tariffs, sometimes at the expense of freer trade. Analysts are definitely sounding alarms. They're saying, look, we haven't seen this level of trade friction in decades. And the long-term economic damage, it could really hit everyone, consumers, farmers, car makers, whole supply chains on both sides of the border.
So just to wrap this up then, we've got Canada hitting back hard with these 50% tariffs. We have former President Trump reacting very strongly. And now these fears of an escalating trade war are really front and center, affecting possibly everything from your car parts to, your groceries.
Absolutely. And it leaves a big question for you, the listener, to think about. Is Canada's move here a justified defense? You're protecting its own interests and sovereignty? Or is it actually a dangerous escalation, something that could potentially unravel decades of really deep economic ties between two incredibly close partners? And maybe more broadly, what does this specific fight tell us about where global trade might be heading?